All right. So we are tonight going to talk about mastering mock scrapes. And, uh, it's to kind of give you a little bit of background real quick on myself and how this all became about was, when I started bow hunting and deer hunting when I was 12 years old, I kind of self-taught, if you want to say. I did have a couple of very good mentors when I was young and starting out, so I failed a lot. And failure is your best teacher. That's, to me, the best way to put it is that it is your best teacher. And learning from watching deer, learning, from cameras, different things, and how deer reacted, especially when I started looking at scrapes and started studying scrapes. And not when I was 12 years old, because I really didn't know what a scrape was at 12 years old, and our deer population was a little different back then. And so learning this and learning from failure, and that's how all of my seminars have come about and have started. So, with this one, as far as mock scrapes go, they're one of the best tools that you can use, not only for mature deer, but for all deer. Some areas it depends on what you're looking for. Myself, we do a lot of management on our farms. However, some people don't have that. Out on public land, different areas, they can't do that. And guys, before I really get started in this, I have to say, please, let's quit the fighting amongst each other saying, hey, you know what? You got to shoot a 7-year-old deer. You got to shoot her. If you shoot a 1-year-old, you're not a good hunter, or you're not. There's a lot of different things that, get put into that age group or age structure of deer. And if you've got 20 acres, it's hard to manage that all the way around. So there's a lot of different factors that go into that. And that's why, mock scrapes are good for anything. They're good from a 1-year-old deer. They're good all the way up to that 6-7-year-old buck. If you do it right, if you have that older deer, hey, sometimes this is the best thing that can happen for them. So we're going to get into this. We're going to talk about mastering these mock scrapes and how to start those. Sorry about the little wiggle there. I've got my dog is running around the house right now. So, but let's get into this and get started. So first off, these are companies that I work with. My team works with, my wife, with Own the Season TV and with Art Helin Outdoors and all my seminar series. And so, these are companies that I trust. These are companies that I've been with for a long time. So if you have any questions about any of these companies, you can shoot me a chat a little later. But right now, we are here to really get into capitalizing on mock scrapes and how to master these. So what we're going to cover today, the 4 things we really want to cover: when and where to create your mock scrapes, how to create them, your maintenance and monitoring of them, which is a big thing, and patterning, and then hunting these deer over them. And as I'm saying here, hunting mature deer, because that's where we're at. But again, you can take this and hunt any deer you'd like. So one of the first things is when and where. And when I usually do this, and I have big groups of people, when I'm standing on a stage talking, the first thing I hear is, really? Because I want to start in July or the first week of August. Yes, we're running a little bit late here with the seminar series, getting started on this, but it's not too late yet. Why am I talking about that first week of August? Why am I talking the end of July? A lot of people are like, well, these deer are still in velvet. They're not doing things. Well, what's happening is this is when your bachelor groups start breaking up. And I've heard guys tell me, my bachelor groups don't break up until mid-September, once the velvet comes off, or sometimes they don't. That is true depending on the age structure of your deer herd. Okay, if you look at 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, you're going to get a lot of those 1 and 2 year olds are going to stay together. They're going to stick together. That older group of deer, if that your oldest deer are 3 years old or 4 years old, 5 years old, they're going to break off. That's why now you're seeing all these big deer that are out there in those fields. But now, a month ago, you saw them all together, a big deer and some of the small deer. Now all of a sudden that big deer is kind of moved off. He's kind of in his own little spot, and you've got those other young deer still where they were. That's because he's starting to break off. That dominant deer or that big deer in your area is starting to return to their home range. They're going from a food source back to a home range now. And so they're hitting that transition area. So this is when you really want to start doing this, because once you start doing this and getting that deer to get back in his area and start hitting those scrapes again regularly, he is telling everybody else that he's back and he's in the area, and he's going to start running that territory again, and he will become that dominant buck. That's why it's essential to start early like this, that end of July and into that first part of August, as they break up. So I've seen people start in the first week of July. That can be a little bit early just because of heat, and we'll get into that with maintenance and stuff. But that middle of July to the end, first part of August, that's when you really want to start looking at this and concentrating on getting your scrape started. So again, when and where? Well, you're putting these scrapes in an area that you really want to be able to hunt later on in the year. So look at your wind direction when you're out there. Look at that ridge top and those funnel areas. Get your topo maps of your areas like the one shown here and learn how to read it. The closer the line, the steeper that area is. The more open area, the flatter it is. So you can tell, where that's flat, that's probably either a bottom or a top, depending on how it runs in to that area. So take that topo map with you and you'll be able to figure that out. Then you look at your wind directions and how that's going to come over those hills and where your stands are going to be, so you can then set those scrapes, those mock scrapes, in an area that you want to put it to have that animal where you want to shoot it. Let's not kid ourselves here. We're trying to put that animal in a position so we can shoot that deer or harvest that animal. We're not doing it so that we can sit there and look at it. Some, yes, that's what they do, but for us as hunters, that's not what we're trying to do. So look at that wind direction. Get on those ridge tops, the funnels, especially those are going to play later in the year. So once you get that funnel in there or you get that ridge top and you have that scrape started, what we're trying to do is get community scrapes built that we'll get into. But with that, area, that will bring them back during that rut. And during the rut, they run more ridge tops. They run more funnels. Earlier seasons, you're looking for those major trail intersections. That's a good place to also start these. Abandoned natural scrapes. What I mean by that is, a few years ago, in the last of this whole seminar series in 4 weeks, I'm talking about land management and the 5 things you need in land management, as I have a habitat consulting business too. One thing that I've learned is we've started to do more burns or more timber stand improvement. Well, when we're doing our timber stand improvement or burns, what's happening with that is that's changing the habitat. So there might have been a non-native licking branch there that was natural that is hanging over that they were using as their licking branch. Now it's burned up or now it's dead because of timber stand improvement. So that's abandoned. So how do you change it? How do you get that back into that? That's a good place to go back to and redo those scrapes, because that was their natural area before. Now, how many do you need? That all depends. I always start out with way more than what I'll do, because some of them will work. Some of them will be consistent. Others will not. Others are just something they'll hit once or twice and then they just taper off. So I always start out with way more. I'm looking like I've got 42 acres that we own, and then I have about 200 acres across the road that I lease. However, on that 40 acres, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 9 scrapes that are already started and up and running. Right now, I have 5 of those that are being super consistent. The other ones are on and off, but I know those other ones get hit really hard during the rut, and that's why they're there. So I started out with probably 14 of them a couple years ago, and slowly have weaned my way down to the ones that I know are consistent. So how do I build these though? Now I've figured out where I want those. Is it an intersection? Is it someplace where there was a natural one that I want to start early? Different things that we talk about, but how do I do this, and what tools do I really need to start a mock scrape? Well, a rake is always good, unless you're going to break off a stick and use that stick. I sometimes tend to stay away from that for the simple fact that if I'm taking a rake, I'm taking it with me. So I'm not taking a stick and putting my scent and getting all sweaty all over it and then throwing it in the woods. So I like to take that rake. A scrape starter. Synthetic is preferred. And, there's so many different types out there that you look at. There's a scrape mate. There's your rack rub, which this is going to be one of your main ones to start out with. One thing you don't want to start out with in early season is going to be a doe estrus, even a synthetic doe estrus. You want to use that natural scent that they're going to be putting in early. So, look at the synthetic types that are preferred because they're going to last longer. Type of ground scent is, again, you're looking at a scrape mate. You want a buck scent. You don't want, if you do anything with doe, you want a straight doe urine, not a doe estrus. Okay. And again, because of the time of year, usually you look at just a natural buck scent that's going to be your buck urine to start that out on the ground. There's a couple different things. I like to use, if you look here, it's called a scrape stick. I like this because I can put this on a post, a cedar post, a T-post, or I can put it on a tree. All right. The way that it works is, I have one right here, actually. It's adjustable, kind of like a flagpole holder. However, on the bottom, it's already machined out to sit on a T-post. So you can put this on a T-post, put it anywhere you want. It's got holes to screw it into a cedar post, or it's got the slot and it's got a strap so you can put it on a tree. So again, if your habitat changes where there was one, now you can put that branch back to where you needed it and use that again. A cedar post, here's a little trick for you if you're going to do this. Take a cedar post and put it at an angle. Don't put it straight up and down. Deer, for some reason, bucks just don't like to come in, and when they're going to rub, they want to tilt their head a little bit and use that. So they don't like that straight up and down. I found that out the hard way because I always put them in straight up and down. Now I've actually run into them with my tractor and pushed them so that I've got a little bit of an angle on them, and I get a lot more buck activity on the cedar post, and that way I can use it for everything. I can use it for the mock scrape. I can use it as a rubbing tree and the licking branch. Again, the branch bracket on this is very crucial in what you're going to use, whether it's an oak branch, a cedar branch, depending on what kind of woods that you're in. Match that up. You can put that in there and use that. In the picture on the slides, you can see that there's some Gravedigger in there. Gravedigger is great when you start getting close to the rut itself. So usually mid-October, I will start switching that over. Okay, and I will run that, and again, start looking at what types of scents that I'm going to put down on there. So now that I've chosen that location, I've identified my licking branch needs, which are, again, your cedars, your oaks, your different branches on there. What else is there? Well, there's hemp ropes. There's a lot of guys that like hemp ropes or vines. I personally, I like the branch because I like the resistance it gives. However, early in the year, some of these deer, some of these bigger bucks, because they're in velvet and just growing, they don't like that resistance yet. So a lot of times that's where that hemp rope or that vine comes in. A vine gives a little bit more resistance, but that hemp rope, they'll come in and they'll take that and get their scent down their back and their glands in between their eyes, and they'll chew on that. And they'll use that and get the glands and the scent out of their mouth as they chew on that. So each one has its own purpose and when they're going to be used. Hemp ropes are great at certain times. Vines, again, if you're looking at just one, I really like the branches. Again, if they break off, hey, then I just cut a new one and put it in here. You know, you can loosen it up and put that right in, especially, you know, when you're looking at something like that scrape stick. Again, now to loosen it, what you want to do is you want to take that rake that you have along and create a 2 foot by 2 foot minimum. What we're trying to do here, we're not trying to create rut areas or rut scrapes. We're trying to produce a community scrape. A community scrape will last 24/7, 365. All year round, deer will hit that. When I go out and I'm doing land management consulting jobs and walking properties, people will look, I'll be like, hey, look, there's a community scrape. And they look at you and go, why are deer scraping in March? Why are they in February? Deer are very social animals. They're always going to be scraping. They're always going to be doing that. So that's what we're looking to create, is that large community scrape. So when you see that huge scrape and it looks like the back of a pickup truck, you always hear guys saying, wow, I got this scrape, looks like the back of a pickup truck. It's so huge. It must be a buck, the size of the world record. Well, not necessarily. It could be a 1-year-old making it, or 2-year-old, or it could be more than likely your community scrape where all your does, your fawns, your young bucks, your old bucks, everybody is hitting that scrape. And that's what we're trying to create. Because if we create that and make that scrape, they will hit that 24/7, 365, and it makes your job a lot easier in patterning and figuring out these deer. So make it a minimum of at least 2 foot by 2 foot. Create that licking branch about 4 feet off the ground, or that hemp rope, or your vine, whichever one you want. Again, I prefer the branches. As you can see in the slides, how high they are, making the scrape underneath it. You can see the cedar post, how there's a little bit of an angle on that, and then this one is screwed right to the side of that cedar post. Once you get all that into play, you apply the rack rub. Rack rub is a synthetic. You put that on the branch. That is your licking branch scent. Okay, that doesn't go on the ground. That's your licking branch scent. Then you add your scrape product to the soil. So that's where you put either your straight doe urine, or you're going to put your scrape mate, which is a buck urine, until you get into that end of October. When you start hitting that middle to end of October, now things are going to transition. You start using more of that estrus scent on those. Let the deer take over, freshen it up if you need to. But by this time, a lot of those deer should be hitting that, and it should be just natural for them to start using it from here on out. When you're starting it, re-rake that soil for that first couple times. Get that scent in there, and then put a little bit more scent on there. Again, if you can, use synthetic, especially if you know there's rain coming up. Synthetic will last longer in the rain. So And I believe that's coming up here. And when I talk about that, maybe. Oh, no. Having technical difficulties. Okay, there we go. So again, with the maintenance and monitoring them, your synthetics, you only need to freshen these things up, every 2 weeks to 4 weeks. That's all you need in there. Natural sense, you're going to need weekly or after rain. So again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a community scrape, and we're trying to get your best deer, our best deer, our most mature deer there. So if I have to go in and freshen this every 2 to 4 weeks, I try to get 3 or 4 weeks if there's not a lot of rain, is a lot better than trying to go in there every week, because those mature deer, the more pressure you put on those, the more likely that deer is going to move off and he's going to be on your neighbors. I don't know you've ever had that happen where you've got this really good deer. And so what do? We want to check our cameras all the time. We're checking. All of a sudden that deer completely disappears. Like, what happened to that deer? We don't see him anymore. Now that neighbor that comes up one time a year for gun season or just to hunt the rut calls you up and says, man, you got to see this buck that I just shot. This thing is giant. Have you ever seen him? You go over and look at it and go, oh man, where did he go? We put so much pressure on them as an older deer, 1, 2, and 3-year-old deer. You can pressure them and they're going to come back. You start getting in that 4, 5, 6-year-old, those deer, they don't like that pressure. So they're going to move off. They're going to disappear somewhere. And I like to say this little story here that I'll get into real quick with my kids. I love my kids dearly. My youngest daughter was more, I don't know if I want to say dramatic than the older one. And so she would come home, and if something would happen, she'd be like, Dad, you know what happened at school today? Well, when I was younger, I could sit down and say, what happened, honey? As I got older, she'd come home and, Dad, you know what happened today? You know what? I got a lot of work to do. I got things to do. I don't want to talk about it. She would follow you somewhere. Then she would follow you, and she would keep pressuring. And then it'd be like, okay, I'm going for a ride and getting in the car and getting out of here. And that's what these deer are doing. As they get older, they don't like that pressure anymore. So the more we're in there doing that, they're going to take off and disappear. So try to stay out of there, and that's why I'm saying synthetics. If you have no activity within 6 weeks, just discontinue that scrape. Don't freshen it up anymore. Don't do anything with it, and hopefully that thing will end up by itself taking over. The deer will know where they are. I've had a lot of these scrapes. What have happened over the years is they'll get hit within that first 2 weeks, and then they go dry. And then all of a sudden rut comes around, those deer remember where they were, and those scrapes start opening up again. So don't discount them altogether. Just discontinue after that 6 weeks and then kind of start again. Back to that scent change time of year. Again, that's really critical. I was out helping a guy, doing these, and he starts dumping doe estrus down in July. And he looks at me, and because he could see the puzzled look on my face, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm starting this scrape. I'm like, I don't know of any does that are, in estrus in July. I said, all we're going to do is educate these deer. So be very careful in what we're putting down there. Okay. One thing too that I kind of want to touch on that I'm not sure. I think I touched on a little bit, but one other thing with a scrape stick or this type of product is I can take this and put it out in the middle of a food plot. And I've had a lot of people that I've toured, my property or hunted with me come out and go, well, why is that branch sitting on a T-post out in the middle of the field? And again, that's why I like these, because I can use a T-post. I can use a cedar post. It depends on where I want it and what I'm doing with it. Do I want to double it as a scrape and as a rubbing post, or do I just need that, small area, or is it an old branch again, like I said, where I need to put just a new branch because it was burned up and there's nothing on that side of the tree, or the tree grew up too tall and now it's way tall, so I have to put something low again. Again, what they're for, and when these people see these, they're like, what are you doing with that? It is to put that animal in a position for us to be able to shoot it and harvest it. Okay, that is what we're doing with it. So look at where your stand is also when you're going out there, and put that in your mind as you're saying, okay, I'm going to put this in a crossing and put this here, but I need to put this in a position to put that deer in an area. That's why I put them out in the middle of a field, especially in a food plot. If we have a 1 acre food plot and we drive out there and all of a sudden they look at me and go, well, what's that, a cedar post with that big branch doing right in the middle of that field? It's not in the middle of the field. If you look, there's a tree stand 20 yards away from it. It gives that reason, because if you've got a 1 acre food plot, it gives that deer a reason to be in that position, where some nights he might be able to walk right by you, different things. This way, it'll give him a reason to come over and check that out and hopefully give you an opportunity to harvest that animal. So that's a big thing with these, and why I really like those. Now, how are we going to monitor these? That's the next big question, is because now you've figured out where you want to put them. You've figured out your maintenance on them. But now we have to monitor them. And I monitor these things all year round. I never take my cameras off of these. And again, that's on private land where I can. Remember, on public land, this works great also. Putting these out there on public land, it's something people like, well, I can't feed my deer. I can't, put mineral blocks out. I can't do certain things like that. Well, you can put a scrape there. You can give them a reason to be there where you want to be. So you put that scrape in that position. But how do I monitor it? Trail cameras. Put a trail camera on it. I like to put them on video mode over these scrapes, because a lot of times what will happen is I'll get 1, 2, 3 different bucks, sometimes 4 bucks at a time coming into these to check them at different times. I had 6 different bucks in February on one scrape. And now I'm looking at that. 3 of those same deer are still on that same scrape. So I even still freshened it up, kept it going, doing my things. As season starts here in a couple weeks, or a little, 3 weeks now, we've got one of our main deer is hitting this scrape continuously. So I'm guessing here within the next week, he's probably going to start rubbing. Once he gets rid and sheds that velvet off, he'll start hitting that scrape even a little bit more, and then they kind of disappear for a little while. There's a couple weeks there in October where they disappeared. Don't get too nervous, but that's their transition, where they're not going to be hitting that scrape and doing things. But all of a sudden, they're going to quit like the 5th, 6th of October, 7th of October, hitting those scrapes. You're going to have about a week and a half of that little October lull that they call it. Which I will get to in one of my other seminars here coming up. And when they come off of that lull, they're going to hit these scrapes extremely hard, getting them open, getting ready for rut, and that's when you transition that over. So put your trail cameras on there, put them on video mode, or put them on a burst mode. The other is scent control. Extremely important on these, because a lot of guys go in and they're going to dump that scent on the scrape. They'll come up, they'll turn off their camera, they go up, and then they hit the scrape. They come back, turn the camera back on. Well, if they've got that all over their fingers, guess what? Now it's all over that camera. That deer comes up, puts his nose on the camera, it goes click or flashes in their face or makes a noise. Now you've just educated that animal. So I like to take vinyl gloves, and I like to take my Code Blue field wipes. I will go in there and I will wipe that camera down completely. Before I touch it, I open it up, turn it off, take the card out, put a new card in. I will walk over, freshen up the scrape, come back, turn that camera on, wipe it down. I don't use a spray, because if I use a spray, I'm going to get it all over the lens. Wipe it down, shut that camera up, and then I move on. And hopefully, you do everything right. They don't smell that. You're going to have a better time monitoring it and figuring out exactly what those deer are doing, what times of day, and make your season a lot more fun and a lot better. With those trail cameras, you want to be able to pattern that and hunt those. That's what we're doing with these. Remember, as I said earlier, this is where trail camera logs come in to effect. Historical records, wind directions, ingress, egress. What I'm looking at or what I'm saying here is if you take historical records on those and save them every year of what that deer is doing and where that deer is going, it'll help you from year to year, especially if you're looking at older deer. So you look at your wind directions, that's for when you're going to go in and hunt those. Your ingress, egress, how am I getting to and from that without those deer knowing, or do I have to cross that path? I don't want to have to cross it. So when you set that up, make sure you don't have to cross that. Look at that wind direction, but look at your historical records. This deer on the slide here, that deer, he was, I hunted that deer at one end of my property. I saw him for 3 days and I could never get a shot at him. He disappeared on me. And for some reason, I thought, I've seen that deer before somewhere. Where have I seen it? I came back. I started going through all my slides. And every year from that date that I lost that deer for approximately 4 days, he hit the same scrape every year for the past 3 years. So I called my wife. I said, hey, we need to get out there and get in stands. She sat in one. I sat in the other, that he wasn't going to get through. And sure enough, I was in the stand for an hour and a half. He came in to hit that scrape, and he never made it out of there. So that historical record is what actually killed that deer, knowing where that deer was going and what days that they're hitting those scrapes. So keep that log of those, and that will help you in the future with what you're doing. This deer here, another deer, same thing. This is my wife's. We patterned this deer off the same scrapes. It was, we watched this deer for probably, 3 weeks. Actually, a buddy of ours did down in Kansas, hitting the same scrapes, hitting a scrape stick, coming through, and we sat that deer. That deer came in, caught up with a doe on that scrape, pushed her off to a bedding area. Next thing I know, this deer disappears for 3 days. We sit it tight with the right winds. That deer shows up 3 days later, and she ends up taking this great buck, again, with those historical records and looking and seeing what that deer is doing. So this deer was last year. I watched this deer for a couple years. 2018, I'd seen this deer. Unfortunately, I was unable to hunt. I had a fall, and not from a tree stand or anything, but I had an accident, and I broke my back in 7 places, cracked my sternum, and had a few other injuries. So I was unable to really do anything or hunt in 18. My wife was able to. That was the year that she shot that big deer. And so last year, same thing. I looked at the same historical records and when this deer, and I'd seen him. And this deer actually started hitting my scrape sticks, would have been about the first week of August. And I watched that deer all the way up through the first part of September. And then again, he was there on and off right up till that first part of October, and then he disappeared. About the 25th of October, that deer started opening those scrapes up again really hard and came back. And because of monitoring that and looking at historical records, he knew where that was. That is the importance of making these scrapes so early, is that I knew this was his scrape because he was consistently there, through that end of July, through all of August, through most of September. I just couldn't get the right winds and right things to hunt him at that time, so I didn't. That's the other thing. If you don't have the right winds, don't hunt them. And I really touch on that in one of my upcoming seminars. So again, this deer, same thing. He hit that, and I was able to capitalize on that because of what we did. all three of these deer that you saw, we were able to capitalize in a lot more deer that I could continue to show you that we've capitalized on, clients have capitalized on, different people, due to setting their mock scrapes so early in the year, monitoring correctly and starting them right and switching over at the right times, building them to become that community scrape. And they've all become a lot more successful, as have we, by looking at this. And again, it's all, failure that's brought me to this point. And now failure has fortunately turned to a lot more success for us, every year in harvesting older, more mature deer. So hopefully, looking at this and, I thank you guys for joining tonight, that this will help you guys in the future. And, starting that and going on and doing something. So we're gonna turn off the camera briefly for a little bit while we open it up. If you guys have any questions for me or anything,